we'll have to see what
maybe
happens.
Part of the problem here is very secretive committees that can't even explain to you what went on. Maybe the public has a problem with that as well. The last Auditor General to review MPs and Senators' expenses joins me now. Kenneth Dye, Auditor General of Canada from 1981 to 1991. Very good to have you here. I appreciate your time. Yeah. Let's deal right off the bat with what Peter Milliken said, saying that the Auditor General does not have the right, basically, under the Act, to review the legislative expenses of MPs and Senators. True or false?
I don't buy that at all. I've been very intrigued by this business. There's no mandate. I've looked at the Auditor General Act. I've looked at the Financial Administration Act. Neither of them talks about the Parliament, either including it or exempting it. And I can't figure out how the legal advisor came to that conclusion, because there's no exemptions in either the Auditor General Act or the Financial Administration Act. In fact, I read it the other way around, that there's an obligation upon the Auditor General.
And just let me jump in here, because you helpfully provided me with the Act and with your own notations and underlining, and I must say, I'm not a lawyer, but this is pretty simple to understand.
Well, I'm not a lawyer either, but it's plain English.
Yeah.
And you know, the first Act came out in 1878, and it was profoundly changed in 1977 with a lot of thought. This was a huge study was done called the Wilson Report, and there was no exemption of parliamentarians in that. And since then, there's been a couple of changes, the big one being the Environmental Commissioner. But essentially, we're looking at a tradition that goes back way back in our parliamentary democracy. And, you know, I was auditing Parliament. My predecessor did.
Well, in fact, you were the last one to do it. You did it in 1990, I believe, was your audit.
Well, I followed up some work that was done in 1980. I came in 81.
Right.
And then we did some more work in I think it was 89 or 90, and reported in 90 or 91. And Denis Desautels, my successor, he actually reported after me once on some aspect of the Commons. And I reported on the Commons, I reported on the Senate, on the Library, and we examined the Governor General, all of which are, I believe, the part of the legislative branch, if you will.
And if I remember,
nobody ever raised this stuff before.
No, and if I remember correctly, too, the audits that you did resulted in improvements in the way the place was run.
Well, that's what audits should do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it's all about.
So, okay, so we've got this situation where the parliamentarians, and this is a nonpartisan issue because all parties are playing kitty bar at the door to the Auditor General. But when the Act seems so clear that the Auditor General has the right and, in fact, the duty to do this and so on, what on earth does Sheila Fraser do now?
Well, I guess she has to make it clear that the present audit going on, the financial audit, done by some external firm, which I imagine they do a good job, is not what she does. She wants to do a performance audit. She wants to look at the systems, the controls. She wants to look at efficiency, economy. I don't think she's really after expense accounts. That'd be pretty small pickings. But she wants to look at whether or not these systems are working, so there's no hanky-panky allowed. And I can't imagine why they're resisting her. And in fact, my advice would be to the Speaker is get your committee to reconsider this, because the public are just going to be so offended. I mean, there's an election coming up one of these days. And people are going to remember who wanted to be exempt from scrutiny.
Is, though, and it's a tricky question, I guess, for the person who occupies the office of Auditor General, but if you've got the right to do it and you've got a committee saying, no, we're not going to cooperate with you, you do have to make the decision eventually, I suppose, as to whether you're just going to go in and do it anyway.
I think she may have the right, but you know, the members of Parliament are her client. So she treats them differently than she would treat a department or an agency or Crown Corp. More courteously, anyhow. In terms of audits, all the same. So when I went to audit the Governor General, I sent a nice letter saying, you know, would you mind? And the answer back, of course not. We're accountable.
Did you get any pushback when you were auditing the Senate and the House from any member at all saying this is wrong, or did they?
None at all. This is the first time this issue has been raised. I had reservations expressed when I decided it was probably time to audit ministers' expense accounts. Suddenly, I think all the expense accounts look pretty clean for the next 10 years. And of course, they're on the web now, so they are clean.
Yeah.
So that's not worth taking valuable audit money and doing something that you know is under public scrutiny anyhow.
Right.
Yeah.
And I guess the ultimate thing, too, the ultimate question here, and you brought it up, what are they thinking? There is an election coming up. And I would imagine that a sharp-eyed auditor like yourself, nothing sets off the alarm bells faster than somebody saying, it's all clean, but I don't want you to take a look at it.
It's called the smell factor.
Right. Ken Dye, what a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your thoughts with us.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Soon after, we notice we're being followed. We've already left the area, but still one of Shell's security vehicles continues to shadow us. He's been following us for at least half an hour. He's taking photos, all this while we're on a public highway.